Okay. Got it right this time. I've had this persistent issue of forgetting to turn the phone sideways to landscape mode before going live. So by the time the thing kicks up, predictably, I'm in portrait mode and I really have no recourse and no ability to then turn it to landscape mode once the session has started. Welcome, welcome. Happy 5th of July. Hope everybody had a nice extended weekend. We have a lot to get into in the boxing world today. There are a few new announcements that I want to discuss. There's some recaps. There's some previews to upcoming action that's about to take place this weekend. There's also some, early thoughts that I have on some of the bigger fights that are taking place a little bit down the line. There was a big title that changed hands this past weekend. That was pretty unexpected. Even though the odds weren't totally lopsided. Dabrowski, what's going on? Thanks for stopping by. Heck yeah. I'm super glad to get back into this. I've been out for like a couple of weeks. It went from having a COVID booster that kind of, put me down for maybe like a day, but that day happened to be Tuesday. Then I went on vacation for a few days and then actually caught COVID. And so that kind of took me out of the next week's chat. Not so much because of how disabling it was or anything like that, but more so just the inability to talk for long periods of time without the voice either giving out or just having all the congestion and everything that comes with it. So definitely glad to be back in the saddle. And like I said, there's a lot to discuss in the boxing world right now. Some of the things that we're going to tackle will be the newly announced Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall fight taking place in September. That fight card is actually pretty solid, even main event aside. I want to talk a little bit about Mikey Garcia's retirement. We've talked about Mikey Garcia a couple times in here, so he unexpectedly retired. I recently did a video specifically about the TJ. What's going on? Thank you for stopping by. Heck yeah. We were talking about Mikey Garcia a little bit before, and I dropped a video, I think like early last week on his retirement. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. A little bit about Josh Taylor dropping another belt as well. The formerly undisputed 140-pound champion has now dropped his second belt. He had dropped, I believe, the WBA first, and now he's dropping the WBC because instead of fighting Jose Zepeda, which, let's be honest, would have been a great fight. That would have been a really interesting fight. It looks like he's pretty hell-bent on fighting Mikey Garcia is dead to me, says TJ. It has been a little bit frustrating, right? Just given all of the talent that he showcased in some of his better fights against like Robert Easter Jr. and Adrian Broner, not to mention how he was just knocking people clean out in the lower weight classes. To see him kind of stall his career, not only with that 2.5-year hiatus because of the contract dispute with Top Rank, but also, he kind of went Manny Pacquiao hunting for like the last couple of years of his career. It's like he wanted one big cash out payday after that Errol Spence fight. Manny Pacquiao ended up going that way, ended up going in a different direction. So, then we got what we got as far as Mikey Garcia fighting Sandor Martin. So, wait. So you bet on Mikey Garcia against Sandor Martin? All I know about those odds, it was like super heavily skewed to Mikey Garcia, right? That was one of the, I think odds wise, that was like the biggest upset. There are other upsets that people would have like listed as upset of the year just because of the magnitude of the fight, like Kambosos versus Teofimo Lopez or something like that. So there were other like big upsets, but in terms of like what the betting odds said and then what took place, that was, I believe, the biggest upset of the year. Oh, at the end of the parlay. Great. Don't you love when that happens? Jay Foreman, what's going on, man? Heck yeah. Thank you for stopping by. Yeah, TJ, yeah, like a 3,000-to-1 favorite. It seemed like a no-brainer because the public knew very little about Sandor Martin. And, he was about to fight Mikey Garcia. So yeah, out of all the upsets that took place in 2021, just mathematically, that was by far, it wasn't even close. That was by far the biggest upset. But yeah, just a super anticlimactic ending. And it pretty much confirmed a lot of the suspicion that we had, right, in recent years in terms of wondering if Mikey Garcia's heart was really in it. Because it's like, okay, if you still have like a competitive drive and you still are angling to be the best, not to just secure the bag or just make that one huge payday, because I mean, everybody would love to fight a Manny Pacquiao, right? So he was hunting, but it's like he was putting all his chips in that basket. And then they were starting to talk about him versus Regis Prograis, which would have been an outstanding fight. I would have loved to have seen that. Did you say Sandor Martin just lost to Anthony Yiggett? Look, I know Sandor Martin fought once and won since his fight with Mikey Garcia, but you're telling me that since that he fought again and lost to the same guy that Rolly Romero knocked out? Okay, so I don't see that at least yet. I see that he fought Jose Felix Jr. and he lost to Anthony Yiggett a few years ago. Got you. 2017. Yeah, you're right. Sandor Martin lost to Anthony Yiggett in September of 2017. I thought you were saying like within the past like few weeks. I'm like, damn, how did I miss that? But yeah, he did look pretty skillful, and he was like a crafty southpaw. So Mikey Garcia was just chasing him. But didn't it seem like Garcia started having increased difficulty, kind of getting out of first and second gear? MAW, what's going on? Yeah, good to hear from you. Were you in that live chat? What was it? Early Sunday morning or Saturday morning? Whenever Maris Briedis fought Jay Opetaia, I think you might have been in that live chat with me as well. But yeah, that was something else, wasn't it? We're gonna get into that one too. Many people have mentioned this. Mikey was born into the game, says Jay Foreman, born into the game and was never really in love with boxing. Yeah, that's correct. I remember they were doing like exposés, I think it was either on HBO or Showtime, because he's, fought extensively on both. But they were doing like features on how he was really wanting to be a police officer, right? That was kind of like what he thought was his calling. And yeah, older brother, Robert Garcia / trainer Robert Garcia was a, lightweight champion at one point himself. So yeah, he was born into it. But it's just crazy because he had like so much technical ability, not to mention the knockout power. So, I mean, there's a list of people I wanted to see him fight. Like, way back in the day, I would have loved to have seen him fight Yorkis Gamboa when he was still at like 126. Yeah, thank you, MAW. Please hit the likes. I mean, and I know everybody's just kind of trickling in. That's why I'm kind of dancing around some of the topics right now. But yeah, thank you guys as always. But yeah, Mikey Garcia, at different periods of his career, there were different fights that most of us wanted to see. And of course, most recently, could you imagine like if he was still like lightweight-ish? I know he's grown out of that, for some time now. But imagine if he was in that lightweight mix. Hey, Leonard Thomas, what's going on? Yeah, thank you for stopping by. Yeah, Mikey dominated Salido. Remember, he dropped him a couple times in that fight, and then Salido's head clashed into Mikey Garcia's nose, broke his nose. So the fight was, the fight was called off. So I think Mikey Garcia won like a technical decision. But yeah, he had dropped Salido. I don't remember seeing Salido dominated that one-sidedly. Mikey Garcia was handling his business for sure. But I mean, you could point to different, parts of his career and name the guy or a couple of guys that you would have loved to have seen him fight. Like, I mean, obviously, to me, the biggest missed opportunity was him versus Vasily Lomachenko, which Vasily Lomachenko was always with Bob Arum, Top Rank. Mikey Garcia famously left Top Rank, cost him a couple years of his career trying to leave Top Rank. So, they probably weren't going to get that done. But from a competitive standpoint, I just don't. I can't. Even look. Most recently, Josh Taylor, Regis Prograis, and Jose Zepeda. I would have loved to have seen him fight any one of those guys. Or, of course, Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, you name it. Yeah, I'm actually dropping a Magsayo Vargas preview tomorrow. That's another title fight that's taking place this coming weekend between Mark Magsayo, who just earned his belt off of Gary Russell Jr., in a fight where, to me, Gary Russell Jr. was clearly one-armed in that fight. I know that was like a lingering injury, and he should have probably done something to take care of that beforehand. But, Mark Magsayo did what he had to do to win it was still a majority decision. Like, Russell was still able to win a couple rounds, even with that one arm. But Mark Magsayo did what he had to do. Of course, he had knocked out Julio Ceja in one of the knockouts of the year prior to that. I think that was on the Manny Pacquiao versus Ugas undercard. But yeah, he's about to take on the longtime 122-pound WBC champion in Ray Vargas, 5'10 and a half. Imagine that. 5'10 and a half, has been fighting at 122 for the past few years, successfully defended his WBC 122-pound title like 5 times. And so then he moved up to 126. He's about to take on the hard-hitting, but still, I'm not going to call him developmentally raw, but he's not a finished product. He's still building skills. Like, you definitely, like, his skills to me, it's not super sophisticated. He still has a bit of a basic skill set, but he does have some physical gifts, has some good hand speed, and has knockout punching power. And plus, again, it's Ray Vargas, who's essentially going up to meet the young champion, a few years younger than Ray Vargas, Mark Magsayo. So yeah, I'm dropping a preview on that one tomorrow, but we're going to get into that one a little bit this evening as well. I'm actually more excited about that fight than I am for Derek Chisora versus Kubrat Pulev 2. Leonard Thomas, you said, do you remember? So were you asking in the Boxing Wave live chat about the link? I think that I had seen your name pop up in there, Leonard Thomas. Let me know if that was you. Yeah, TJ, the Spence fight was ridiculous. As was, when Amir Khan went up to fight Canelo Alvarez, when Kell Brook went up to fight Triple G. What was another case of this? We had another one where somebody was essentially daring to be great. I mean, obviously Canelo has, did it and ran into Dmitry Bivol, but there was another case of some Rigondeaux versus Lomachenko was another one. I never really loved those situations where a guy is going up 1 or even 2 weight classes sometimes to try to really either challenge themselves or because they can't get a good fight in their respective division. But a lot of people, because of how good Mikey Garcia was looking, against Sergey Lipinets and, obviously against Robert Easter Jr., they thought, damn, does Mikey Garcia have a shot against Errol Spence Jr.? Turned out he didn't. But some people actually thought that he might be competitive there. Richard Dwyer, I don't know how many of y'all watch Richard Dwyer, boxing analyst online on YouTube, Gambler's Advisory, but he had actually picked Mikey Garcia to beat Errol Spence Jr. I disagreed strongly with it, but I at least got the argument that he was trying to make. Mikey Garcia could have set traps, but at the end of the day, he has so much trouble trying to close the distance, and he probably didn't anticipate that Errol Spence was going to fight that style of fight, where he's kind of on his back foot, working behind a jab and sort of, dominated with that right-handed jab, right, as a southpaw. Mikey Garcia really couldn't get out of first gear in that one. It ended up being a big managerial misstep. And to me, that was kind of the beginning of the end of his career. Now, again, maybe his heart was out of it prior to that, but, the writing was on the wall based on his inactivity after the Errol Spence fight, because if you try to get back on the horse and go back to 140 or 135, but he only had those 2 fights after that, one against Jesse Vargas, where to his credit, he did win the fight, and then against Sandor Martin, where he notably lost via, huge upset. Let's see. Yeah, Regis didn't get the shot. Yeah, Regis Prograis, should have gotten, if not Mikey Garcia, which that one fell apart. I would have loved to have seen Regis Prograis battle for the vacant, first the WBA belt that Josh Taylor was forced to drop because he didn't fight his WBA mandatory. So now Josh Taylor has obviously dropped 2 belts because he's not going to be fighting Jose Zepeda. He seems like he really wants that get back. Even though he won via very controversial decision against Jack Catterall, he just wants to kind of right the wrongs. Where, you have to respect it on some level. The fact that even though he squeaked by with that gift decision, that he wants to kind of clear it up and say, no, 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 no. I'm the man of this division. I'm going to prove to you guys that that was an off night. I get that and I respect it. Is it the guy who I want to see Josh Taylor fight next? No, because Josh Taylor to me is still an elite fighter. I still have Josh Taylor in my pound for pound top 10. But, I do respect the move, but it's coming at a cost. Now he's just going to be going in there with the IBF and the WBO belts. So now, he hasn't been undisputed for like a couple months after the first stripping of the title. Now he just has 2 of those 4 belts. TJ, do I think Pulev stops Derek Chisora this time? I do not. It can happen. I mean, Derek Chisora is pretty durable. We have seen him stopped a few times. But if you look at, who has beaten Kubrat Pulev, it's only Anthony Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko. I expect Pulev to pull that off. But I think that, Derek Chisora is going to keep on coming forward, keep on muddying the waters, make some of those rounds kind of like, toss-ups, a coin toss, kind of a 50-50 swing round. I could see some of the rounds being muddied up, and I think that Pulev is probably going to win via either a close unanimous decision or maybe like a majority decision where one judge has it a draw and then the other 2 have it like 116, 112 or something like that. But I have a lot of respect for Chisora's durability. I do wonder, and you're mentioning it now, and I see it, that I wonder how Derek Chisora is going to deal with the punishment that Joseph Parker doled out in that rematch. Because, boy, he took a beating. That first fight, I thought effect to where even if they make it out of that fight, that they're just not the same chin-wise in their subsequent fights. And I think that is a possibility here. Yeah, MAW, jumping double weights like that. But those are the guys shooting for greatness. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Mikey Garcia was definitely swinging big. And let's keep it real. Like, a lot of people didn't want to fight Errol Spence. And Mikey Garcia is the one who raises his hands. Oh, how am I on sound right now? Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I was getting an incoming call. I'll try to hit a button to knock that out a lot quicker next time. Let me know if I am audible now. Good now. Thank you, guys. So, what I was saying is, I think it was TJ brought up Derek Chisora's punch resistance. I was saying that, he took an absolute beating against Joseph Parker in the rematch. And sometimes when you see somebody take that big of a beating, they're able to make it out of that fight because of their resilience and their durability. But sometimes the next fight is the one where their chin is totally shot because of how big of a beating they took in that prior fight. And I think that could be the case for Derek Chisora. And then I was saying, I think it was MAW who was saying that's rough, jumping double weights. But those are the guys who are shooting for greatness, in my humble opinion. Yeah, I agree. Mikey Garcia was swinging for the fence, and nobody wanted to fight Errol Spence around that time. Nobody was like, and Mikey Garcia is the one who's raising his hand saying, no, I want that guy. No, I don't want any of the guys at 140, 135. I want that guy, the king at 147. You got to have guts to go there. I feel like that was one of those go big and go home, but he put all of his eggs in that basket, and it seemed like, in terms of being all in, and I do think he was all in for training against Errol Spence, but it just seems like losing to Errol Spence in the way that he did, it seemed like his fighting spirit was kind of shattered after that. Even though, again, he did pick up that nice win against Jesse Vargas. Yeah, Jay Foreman, been subscribed to Dwyer for a long time. Yeah, 7 years or so. Yeah, Dwyer, I love listening to Richard Dwyer. Super analytical. You know, some of the videos are like 30 plus minutes, but if you are a fan of his like oratory style, yeah, I would definitely recommend Richard Dwyer. That's probably the first YouTube boxing channel that I was listening to regularly. Let's see. Did I lose sound again after that? Benny Bronx, what's going on? Thank you for stopping by. Yeah, Pulev against Jerry Forrest. I thought that Jerry Forrest, remember we talked about that a little bit. I thought that Jerry Forrest might pull off the upset against the bigger name Kubrat Pulev because of how good Jerry Forrest looked in those draws against Zhang Zheli and against Michael Hunter. Jerry Forrest looked really good in those, so I'm thinking, dang, like he might catch Kubrat Pulev slipping. But then we're reminded Kubrat Pulev is an A-level fighter. If you look at his, you look at his track record, even as an amateur, look at some of the world championships that he's competed in. You look at some of these guys' resumes, and they were like, not always Olympic gold medalists, but in some of like the world championships, international tournaments, and so forth, you see like bronze medal, silver, gold. Yeah, Kubrat Pulev is one of those guys. So it's going to take an elite fighter, apparently, even at 40 plus years old, to beat Kubrat Pulev. I just don't think Derek Chisora has the goods, but he's got a style where he's kind of in there and in the fight with anybody. Yeah, MAW, Jay's on point with Dwyer. Yeah, Leonard Thomas. Yeah, Dwyer's Spence predictions are pretty bad. His Spence predictions are bad. His Canelo picks are often bad, and his Anthony Joshua picks are often bad. But aside from that, it's always an interesting listen. One of the things that I wanted to just kind of go over for a brief second is, they did announce the fight between Claressa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. Finally, Claressa Shields is going to have an opponent that hopefully elevates and boosts her status. It's not going to be an easy fight. I just looked at the odds today. I think they actually have Savannah Marshall as a very, very slight betting favorite. I'll tell you this right now. If I had to pick today, I would say, put a little bread, put a little money on Claressa Shields. I really do think that she comes out on top. I'm gonna do a deeper analysis of that fight, obviously, but I'm glad that they announced the fight. It's taking place sometime in September. I forgot the exact date, but yeah, look out for Claressa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. By the way, what do you guys think of Josh Taylor kind of going forward in essentially choosing Jack Catterall if they indeed make that fight? Choosing Jack Catterall over his mandatory title defense in Jose Zepeda. Yeah, that's not a bad bet, I don't think, TJ. In my opinion, taking Claressa Shields at plus 125 against Savannah Marshall, I think that's pretty solid. I'd be very surprised if Claressa Shields loses that fight. I know Savannah Marshall is a very high quality fighter. I just have a lot of respect for Claressa Shields. Just her skills. I mean, she's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. 4 years apart. I mean, there are only a few who could boast that type of a resume. What's holding her back is, one, for some reason, I mean, look, I have my own theories about why Claressa Shields isn't a more popular fighter here in the States and abroad. Well, one, but boxing isn't here in the isn't big in the United States generally, and yeah, I mean that you have to start there, and then you could extrapolate different conversations from that. But that's where it starts. Claressa Shields, though, she doesn't have a lot of knockouts, and I mean a lot of the women fighters don't have a lot of knockouts. But you see Claressa Shields, and sometimes it looks like in the first couple of rounds, like dang, Claressa Shields is dominating this fight by like the first or second round. She's probably gonna get this girl out of there, and then 8th, 9th round come around, and she's still in there and hasn't finished the fight. I think that has kind of tainted some people's perception of her abilities. But I'm thinking, don't get it twisted. Skill for skill, she's about as elite as about as elite as it gets. And I do think that she's going to beat Savannah Marshall. But again, I'll do some more research on that one, and who knows, maybe further study could change my mind on that. Yeah, happy 4th of July to everybody. Yeah, NMTK. Thanks for coming through. What's going on? Let's see. Somebody said something about Ruiz and Ortiz. Yeah, Benny Bronx said He's got King Kong by TKO. Wow. So okay, it's either you have that much respect for Luis Ortiz's abilities, which I do. I mean, he's still only lost to Deontay Wilder, but he hasn't fought any of the guys. He hasn't fought enough of those mid-tier guys. It's like, there's been a bottleneck at the top for a while, right? I mean, Andy Ruiz was able to kind of get there and upset, Anthony Joshua, and that's how he got into like the elite mix, even though he had fought Joseph Parker for that vacant belt that Joseph Parker held for some time a few years ago, right? But it's been a bottleneck between Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and so forth. But then you had that like mid-tier class where you had Luis Ortiz, Andy Ruiz Jr., for a long time, Alexander Povetkin, Joseph Parker, and then more recently, guys like Michael Hunter, Hergovich, there are a couple others that I'm leaving out. Kubrat Pulev is kind of in that mix, but we've had that crop, and I've been wanting to see Dillian White, been wanting to see more of those guys fight each other. Now, to Joseph Parker's credit, he's kind of been the one who's taken on a lot of those, champs and near champs, but Luis Ortiz fought like none of them. The best guy that he's probably fought besides Deontay Wilder is either Charles Martin or Bryant Jennings. Remember when he knocked Bryant Jennings out with the uppercut, King Kong? Yeah, his strength of schedule has been super disappointing. And it's bad enough, when you're coming out of Cuba, you're usually starting your professional career late. That's about to change because I think we've cozied relationships to where they're going to be Cuban fighters are going to be able to come to the States or wherever they want to go a lot earlier in the career rather than spending their entire 20s sometimes fighting in the amateur system, in the Cuban boxing system. So yeah, but Luis Ortiz, it was bad enough that he's kind of turned pro late. But then you look at his strength of schedule, and it's like, damn, it's kind of like a what could have been. Like, I don't know who would have won between, Luis Ortiz versus Joseph Parker, Alexander Povetkin, Dillian White, any of these guys. But we're at least going to see what Luis Ortiz at 40, 41, 42 now or something, what he has against I don't know, is it still considered a prime Andy Ruiz? I have serious doubts as far as that guy's commitment. It's weird because ever since the rematch where he came in even more out of weight against Anthony Joshua in the rematch, he took another hiatus. He eventually came back to fight Areola. Didn't look great. But then you see him get with Eddie Reynoso. It's like, oh, man, Andy Ruiz is serious. And even though I thought that the circumstances of him getting rid of Manny Robles, that seemed a little bit shady, a little bit flaky, didn't it? I mean, I respect a boxer's ability and right to decide who they're training with. But it's one of those where if something's not going right, you've got to be accountable and blame yourself first. And I just hope that that's what Andy Ruiz did. And I hope that he didn't blame Manny Robles on some level. So he leaves Robles. Then he goes with Eddie Reynoso. Has he since left Eddie Reynoso? I know Frank Sanchez just went to Joe Goosen, right? Along with Ryan Garcia, who's now with Joe Goosen. Is Andy Ruiz still with Eddie Reynoso, or is he also with Goosen? I think he might still be with Reynoso, but let me know if you know different. I'm just not sold on how all in Andy Ruiz is at this point. But hey, Benny Bronx, you picking Luis Ortiz over Ruiz? Personally, I still, you could absolutely be right on this. I still slightly favor Andy Ruiz because of how shaky Luis Ortiz, in my opinion, was looking versus Charles Martin before knocking him out. But he's still King Kong. He still has devastating power. I just think that his reflexes at this point are pretty shot. I think that his ability to get out of first and second gear and really start, putting combinations together, it's not what it was. For instance, it's not where it was when he fought Bryant Jennings. He's just not the same King Kong. Even when he fought Christian Hammer a couple years ago, I'm like, damn, it looks like King Kong might have lost something. But I'm very glad that they made that fight, because that's actually one of those kind of near elite, just out of the top 3, top 4 heavyweights. That's one of the fights that I wanted to see the most for a couple years, Ortiz versus Ruiz. Let me get to to some of your guys' comments. Yeah, Jay Foreman, I agree with Benny Bronx. I'm super pumped for that fight. And you say you think Ruiz takes it by KO. Um, Damn, Ruiz by KO, very possible, especially if he gets Ortiz in trouble, because you know how he could pour on the offense with fast combinations. MNTK, it's been a while. Yeah, yeah, this is a recovery video. Yeah, I was definitely out of the mix for a couple weeks, and I'm super glad to be back and talking boxing with you guys. Yeah, Ortiz was getting dropped by Charles Martin. Yeah, exactly, TJ. He had trouble getting through Charles Martin's jab, so you're also taking Andy Ruiz by stoppage. Yeah, I feel you, TJ. We'll see, absolutely. And NMTK has an MMA question or a comment. A UFC fight with Usman versus Edwards. Press conference got me excited. Yeah, you know, this is actually the rematch between Usman and Leon Edwards. They had fought when Usman was working up the ranks, well before he started beating like the RDAs, Dos Anjos, and you know, beating who else? Damian Maia on the way to the title shot against Tyron Woodley. But this is a different Leon Edwards, but this is also a very different Kamaru Usman. I still have to shade Usman, but you always wonder, once a guy's been champion for like a few title defenses, you just wonder how hungry can you still be? And I could only assume and hope that Kamaru Usman is still totally dialed in. I'd imagine Leon Edwards is. He's been waiting for a few years now for his big shot. Jay Foreman said he's picking Ruiz, but let's remember that he got hurt by Areola. Yes, he did get dropped by Chris Areola. That's the thing. We're dealing with one guy who's like clearly, you know, he's an older fighter, 40 plus, and then another guy who we don't know if he being Andy Ruiz is getting the full juice out of the squeeze of his, you know, potential. I know that he put it together for Anthony Joshua in that first fight. And obviously when he was beating guys like Dimitrenko before fighting Anthony Joshua the first time, and even the way that he fought Joseph Parker. I've always thought that Andy Ruiz was a very slept-on fighter with a lot of skill. I just don't know if he still has like the stomach for you know, that type of dedication and training. So yeah, that one, they're asterisks by both guys. I'm worried about Ortiz's age, and I'm worried about Andy Ruiz's commitment. And then TJ said, not only is Ortiz's chin gone, but his legs are gone. Bad combo against Ruiz. Yeah, I agree with that. NMTK says Triple G versus Canelo 3, or I guess we got to say Canelo versus Triple G 3, right? It's definitely, yeah. So, you know, I just did an early thoughts on that one. I can't unsee Triple G getting kind of banged to the body against Ryota Murata, and maybe I'm making too much of that early work for Murata. And, you know, Triple G has had slow starts before, and then he piles it on and just, you know, devastates the opponent eventually. I just can't. Canelo does a lot of research. He watches a lot of tape, he studies, and he's fought the guy for 24 rounds now. I just can't picture Canelo getting in there with somebody who he doesn't like, desperately wants to finish. And look, I feel like with Canelo losing to Bivol the way that he did, I kind of feel like there's hell to pay. Like someone's going to have to pay for that. And I feel like Triple G, unfortunately, at this stage of his career, at 40 years old, and with what I see as being an injustice in the scorecards, especially in that first fight, I'll argue much less about the second fight. In that first fight especially, it's just unfortunate for Triple G that he finds himself, I mean, huge payday, but at this stage, he's going to find himself in the trilogy fight with a very hungry, very pissed off Canelo Alvarez. Because imagine like when Canelo like woke up the next morning after losing to Bivol, seeing his name drop out of people's like pound for pound top 10, a lot of like I told you so's and so forth. Yeah, Canelo's not happy right now, and I think that his opponent is going to be the one that suffers. And I think that he has to know that his work to the body of Triple G has to be like a major recipe, you know, or a major ingredient to the recipe in beating Triple G this time around. You know, they got kind of, I mean, they did work each other's bodies in that rematch especially, but boy, like, it's just hard for me to picture a 40-year-old Triple G taking a lot of incoming fire from Canelo to the body when Canelo, and here's another issue with Triple G. Yes, he does have a great jab. Yes, he does have prodigious punching power and always underrated boxing ability. But in terms of just like the tit for tat, like the one exchange per one exchange, where the like just the quicker hands and the sharper reflexes in terms of slipping and countering, just slipping and countering, and basically like who is like the quicker, more responsive fighter in the heat. It became evident to me, even in their first fight, that was Canelo. Even if I thought Triple G won the fight, I'm like, damn, Canelo's looking pretty quick against Triple G. So the fact that exchange for exchange, I expect Canelo to be the snappier puncher and the one who's able to just let his hands go and to make the guy miss and respond and connect a little bit better in that sweet science aspect. That plus the body work plus the age, like I just see it as being a confluence of bad results for Triple G. I'm just kind of wondering whether Triple G, given his durability and so forth, if he's able to go the full 12 or whether Canelo stops him. But I'm going to do a proper preview on that one as we near the fight date. I'm going to get to a few interesting things that I'm seeing here. MAW, you say Ruiz is still slim at the moment. No, that'd be dedication. No, okay. So with Ruiz, it's weird. I almost feel like he's doing some sort of like a Photoshop deep fake or something like that, because I remember going into the rematch against Anthony Joshua. Do y'all remember this? Like on social media, they were showing like training pictures of Andy Ruiz coming in for the rematch. And it's like, oh, Andy Ruiz is coming in like lighter than ever before. And, you know, I'm wondering, why the hell does he want to do that? Don't change a thing. Come back in exactly at the same weight that you were in before. Don't lose weight. Don't gain weight. Come in exactly the same weight. But then they were showing us these pictures of Andy Ruiz like working out. His legs are very muscular, always very muscular legs. But his upper body was like looking super slim, and I'm like, yo, like damn, Andy Ruiz is looking slim. But then we see him actually take to the ring, and he's like 20 pounds heavier than he was in the first fight. So I'm almost not really believing anything that I'm seeing in terms of Andy Ruiz looking slim down. When I see him in a ring with his shirt off fighting and he looks a little bit slimmer, I'll believe it. But you know, he could come back, he could come in the ring at the same weight that he was against Anthony Joshua the first fight, not the second fight, but the first fight. It's still heavy, but it's still Andy Ruiz, so I'm still all good with that. I just don't, I can't confirm nor deny whether he is slim or not, but I would err on the side of no, but I could be wrong. Let me see. Yeah, Triple G's no joke, MAW, even today. And you're right, he doesn't have to cut weight to make 160 like he's been doing miraculously his whole career. I mean, you want to talk about dedication. This guy is still making 160 in his late 30s and hitting 40. Like, yeah, Triple G's just, you know, he's a different animal. Like, and it's crazy because the more I think about it, the more I just wish he fought more of the elite 160 guys when he was still in his early 30s, late 20s, and so forth. I wish he fought, you know, Billy Joe Saunders, Kid Chocolate. But to be fair, I don't think people were exactly lining up to fight Triple G during that period either. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so Sector Roadblocks. Hey, what's up? Sector Roadblocks, thanks for coming through. Heck yeah, good to hear from you. Yeah, we just touched on that a little bit earlier about Josh Taylor vacating his second belt, where not only did he drop the WBA belt because of the unwillingness to fight the mandatory there, but now he's dropped, I believe, the WBC belt because he's not going to be fighting Jose Zepeda, which I would have actually rather see him fight Jose Zepeda than Jack Catterall, but it looks like he really wants to fight Jack Catterall, so he's only going to be going into that rematch with Catterall with 2 of the 4 belts. Yeah, those are the breaks when it comes to like mandatories and sanctioning bodies. He's just going to have the IBF and WBO belts, but I still see him as being the best fighter at 140. By the way, I had asked the question a little while ago about, you know, who's had the most disappointing like prime years between, and I think I put a poll out on YouTube. Between like Jamal Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, and one of the people was Mikey Garcia, and another one was Regis Prograis. But it's like, man, Regis Prograis just, it seems like he's got a total career stall at this point. Like, who did he just fight? Tyrone McKenna? And that was after fighting, Ivan Redcatch, and then like another lesser named guy before Ivan Redcatch. It's like ever since that super close loss to Josh Taylor, he just can't get anything back on track. Not to mention his potential fight with Mikey Garcia, that fell out. I mean, I feel bad for Regis Prograis at this point. Like, he's like 33, 34, almost 34, something like that now. So it's like, it's kind of now or never. Like, he really has to make these next 2-3 fights count. Let's see what we got. Yeah, I agree. George Cologne, thanks for coming through. Yeah, the age factor is really against Triple G at this point. 40 years old. I mean, numbers don't lie. I mean, we have seen fighters fight well into their 40s, such as, most famously, Bernard Hopkins fought till 51 years old. It's like, what the hell is a 51-year-old doing in there with Joe Smith Jr.? Are you out your mind? Like, and then before that, fighting Sergey Kovalev. And then, yes, he lost those 2 fights, but then like beating, near elite fighters in around that, 48, 49, 50 years old too. Yeah, but like he truly was an alien in that regard. Yeah, Benny Bronx asks, are we ever gonna get Spence versus Crawford? I've been trying not to talk about that one too much, even though I could talk about it for days. And that is the best, in my opinion, the best fight in boxing. Just pound for pound. That is the best fight in boxing. Spence versus Crawford. It looks like they're getting closer. But here's the thing. If they are angling for October or November, you would imagine they're not going to announce the fight like 4 months out. So the fact that it hasn't been made yet, yes, a lot of people are wondering like, damn, is it going to be made? Right? But you also think about it, because a lot of people are like, oh boy, like what's going on? Here we go again. Like, are they not going to make Spence Crawford again? You just have a bad feeling about it, right? But then if you look at the way that the dates are lining up, usually fights are announced like maybe 2 months before the fight starts. If it's a super duper fight, maybe 2.5 months. But where are we right now? We just started July, so that'd be July, August, September. So if they're fighting October, they probably wouldn't announce that fight for like another 3 weeks minimum. And if they're fighting in November, then we're probably gonna have to wait another month plus before we get an announcement on that fight. So I do think that they're going to make the fight this time around. I just think that timing-wise, it kind of makes sense that they haven't made anything official, which obviously leads all of us then to speculate, oh, is something going wrong? Is something breaking down in negotiations? And I've seen some people do videos on some of the alleged stuff that's happening contractually, or, is this guy pricing himself out? Is this guy pricing himself? All of that stuff. I look at it all at this point as speculation. I believe and I hope that the fight gets made, and if it does get made for November or October, then it should be another few weeks before they make it official, because you want that sweet spot of maybe a couple months to properly promote that fight, as opposed to just announcing it way, ahead of time. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like Arthur Beterbiev, Sector Roadblock, says he's probably going to fight Anthony Yard. And you say that they're probably going to make it in October. That would be a pretty quick turnaround. But damn, given how quickly Arthur Beterbiev destroyed Joe Smith Jr., I guess it's not super surprising that he can have a quick turnaround. It's just kind of different for Beterbiev because we're used to seeing him fight so rarely. It's almost like the Loch Ness Monster. You know what I mean? He like comes out like every year and a half. The monster that is Arthur Beterbiev returns to the ring and demolishes somebody. Then it's like, damn, did I dream that? Does this Arthur Beterbiev guy like really exist? But yeah, I mean, look, how crazy was it when he fought Joe Smith Jr., where Joe Smith Jr. starts the fight off kind of jabbing his way in, and a lot of people made a good point that he looked like he was kind of lost with the jab. Like, he was flicking the jab out, but it didn't look like an effective jab. And he was kind of leaving the jab hand out there a little bit too. So he's like, are you probing with it, or are you popping with it? Are you trying to measure distance with it? What exactly are you doing? Because if you don't know what you're doing with your jab hand, you might as well just keep it at home. And if you're going to let it go, if anything, just pop it out there to give the opponent something to think about. But what you don't want to do against somebody who could throw a deadly right hand over the top is to mess with the jab and leave it out there, right? But we saw Joe Smith Jr. kind of coming in. But did you see that in the first round, a minute before that knockdown, towards the end of the first round, that but Beterbiev kind of hit Joe Smith Jr. upside the head. And Joe Smith Jr., he didn't stagger or anything. In fact, I think they tied up. And then Joe Smith Jr., they disengaged, and then they came back in. And it looked like, I don't know, it looked like Joe Smith Jr. was just, at that point, was just going like this with the jab. And it's like, did something happen? Like, did his equilibrium get knocked off? Is he clearing some, like, cobwebs that we're not super aware of yet? And then like a minute later, he gets dropped with like 10 seconds left in the first round. But man, that was a pretty, I can't say shocking in terms of the result, but I was shocked watching how it played out. Because like, the thing about Beterbiev is, and maybe we should have looked at this a little bit closer, maybe some of y'all did, but you know, the fact that he throws those super short punches, the one thing I was picking up on, and the reason I picked Beterbiev versus via late stoppage is because I thought that Joe Smith Jr. had a bad habit of when he starts getting backed up, he just kind of puts his hands up like this and starts kind of going straight back and just letting the guy open up. Well, if you start doing like that and letting Beterbiev let like 4 punches go, what do you think's going to happen with a puncher of that caliber? Beterbiev is like one of the worst guys to just kind of shell up against, even momentarily. So once he had Joe Smith Jr. hurt, it was all academic after that. It didn't matter whether it was a short hooks that go around the guard or those little uppercuts that went through the guard. Joe Smith Jr. was kind of a dead man walking at that point. And, you know, I'm interested to see if he even continues a career because I saw some of the comments and it looks like he's going to kind of think it over and he's a little bit on the fence. But, yeah, Beterbiev, instead of fighting Dimitri Bivol, which we didn't even expect that to happen right off the bat, I wish it could happen, but it looks like he's going to handle his mandatory against Anthony Yarde, who has basically a puncher's chance and not much else. But sometimes a puncher's chance is still enough. But you would have to heavily favor Artur Beterbiev in that one as well. Here's what I worry about with the light heavyweight division, right? Dimitri Bivol is going to have to fight somebody because it's not going to be Canelo next. Canelo's about to fight Triple G. So, does Bivol fight Buatsi? Does he fight Zordo Ramirez? Say he fights one of those two guys, and then, you know, Canelo fights Triple G. Beterbiev fights Anthony Yarde. Does Bivol then pivot to Canelo, or do they somehow make a cross-promotional fight between Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn? Like, you want to talk about two promoters that don't seem to work well together and don't speak nicely of each other in the press. Getting them to make the battle for undisputed between Beterbiev and Bivol, will that happen after Bivol fights either Buatsi or Zordo Ramirez? Or, you know, so basically, is it going to be Bivol versus Beterbiev or Bivol versus Canelo? Because if it's Bivol versus Buatsi or Ramirez, and then it's Bivol versus Canelo for the rematch, well, then you're not going to have like a 37-year-old Artur Beterbiev in there. You're going to have like a 38, maybe even 39-year-old Artur Beterbiev in there, which I don't love Beterbiev's chances if that's the case. So I don't want... Yeah, and hey, music and sports games. Hey, thank you. First of all, thank you for coming through, big time. And he said Bivol's not risking the bag, and why would you, right? So that's what I'm thinking. And my brother Billy, like he hit me up. He texted me like after Beterbiev destroyed Joe Smith Jr. He's like, hey, we have like a little boxing group chat. He's like, hey man, don't let Beterbiev mess up your money, man. Like don't let him ruin your whole Canelo rematch payday. So that's the thing. I don't think Bivol's gonna go right to Beterbiev after fighting Zordo Ramirez or Joshua Buatsi. So it's like you're gonna get a 38 or 39-year-old Beterbiev. You know, if ever, because the chances are what usually happens is like it did again between Adonis Stevenson and Sergey Kovalev, they didn't make the fight. So eventually Adonis Stevenson gets knocked out and almost killed, really, literally almost killed in the fight against Alexander Gvozdyk. So that ruined that potential showdown. And then obviously on the other side, you had Andre Ward fight the two fights with Sergey Kovalev, which ended with Andre Ward hitting right at the belt line and Kovalev basically just melting on the ropes. So I hope that doesn't happen with Beterbiev versus Bivol. But if I'm thinking ahead right now, I I don't picture that fight getting made within the next calendar year. And if it doesn't, now you're really dealing with an old Artur Beterbiev, which is unfortunate. Let me know if you guys see that any differently. Ron Sizzle 402, what's going on? Thank you for coming through. Yeah, I want to get to some of your guys' comments. Let's see. Yes, I do. TJ, do I think Von Alexander is a live dog against Felix Cash? I caught you a little bit earlier asking that same question, a thoughtful question as well. I do think that Von Alexander is a live dog. I would favor Felix Cash, you know, the young guy, the prospect and all that. Von Alexander, I believe, is 36 years old, and he's really kind of a win some, lose some guy. But if you look at some of the guys he's lost against, I mean, you're talking about Janibek, who else? Bek Bully Melikuziev. He's been fighting some thrashers in there. So some of those losses, you got to say, well, he did fight, you know, this is his competition. But then you see a couple of his other losses, like against Dennis Duglin, right? I think Von Alexander lost to him. So he's a live dog, but I think that Felix Cash are going to get the better of him. Do I think the light heavyweight undisputed will happen after the mandatories? Yeah. So yeah, we were just MAW. I don't see the battle for undisputed happening within the next calendar year. Benny Bronx. Let me see. Oh, the Spence Crawford. We talked a little bit about that. MAW. Yeah, Andrade. Yeah, no super fights for Andrade. I don't see it on the horizon either. And now he's going to be entering his mid-30s. Very unfortunate. I hate it when this happens. It's the downside to the politics in boxing. If boxing was truly sport-like, then you would not have any duckable fighters. And what's a duckable fighter? It's either somebody who's just annihilating people like a 20-something-year-old Triple G, or it's somebody who will probably win, very difficult to beat, but very, very difficult to look good against, as they say, and often somebody who doesn't match the risk with the reward, which is what how a lot of people are viewing Demetrius Andrade, and it's messed up because once you're hit with that reputation, then it's tough to shake it. Luckily for like Devin Haney, for instance, he got the opportunity thanks to George Kambosos agreeing to fight him, right? Because now he's unduckable. He's now got all the belts. But if it wasn't for things like that, he could have, I mean, he's still in his early 20s, so he had a lot more time to work with than Andre does right now. But I don't see anybody who Andre really wants to fight, wanting to fight him within the next calendar years. And it's a damn shame. You know, I was hoping after he fought Liam Williams, after he fought, the guy's name's not coming to me, who he fought right after Liam Williams, the guy who he just knocked out like in the first or second round. I was really hoping that because of the way that he was winning a couple of those fights and who he was fighting in the case of Liam Williams, that it's like, okay, hopefully he could get something worth it now. Still doesn't appear to be the case. And now he's got like a shoulder injury entering his mid-30s. Super unfortunate. Jay Foreman said, yeah, most disappointing. Andre's never taken a shot. If he doesn't get a big fight soon, he'll go down and will be remembered as one of the biggest wasted talents in boxing. It's unfortunate because he's been a belt holder at 154 and at 160. You know, he could potentially be a belt holder at 168, but to be honest, like 168 is one of the wackest divisions. Like, not because of the talent, but remember what the landscape was before Canelo just shattered everybody, except for David Benavidez, who was no longer holding the WBC belt. Remember, you had Zordo Ramirez, you had Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, and David Benavidez for some time. Then Billy Joe Saunders had the WBO, but none of these guys were fighting each other. And then Canelo fights like 80% of them. So yeah, I don't know who if Andre's going to have any better luck up at 168 securing a big fight. I think that David Benavidez would be down to fight him. He seems to be willing to fight anybody. At least that's the way it appears to be. Yeah, so Sector Roblox said if Spence Crawford is in October, then Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu looks to be next. I don't know if it's November. Do you guys know if it's been confirmed for November? It does appear to be next. Early thoughts on that one, Jermell Charlo. Tim Tszyu does hit hard, but I mean, not just because he looked the way that he did in the opening round against Terrell Goucher, but Tim Tszyu, to me, he's a good pressure fighter. I would just like to see a little bit more, pretty much just quicker reflexes, just that kind of like split-second reactive ability, because Jermell Charlo has that. And I don't see Look, I would want to see Tim Tszyu fight Brian Castano. I wish that was the fight that could get made on that side. You know, not Charlo, but Castano versus Tim Tszyu, and then have like Jermell Charlo versus Sebastian Fundora. I would have preferred for it to shake out that way. And by the way, I think I would have favored Brian Castano over Tim Tszyu. Yeah, you're right. MAW said Andre hung around holding hope to unify a middleweight for two. Yeah, man, I could go on about how disappointing it was that Jermall Charlo didn't agree to fight him, that Jaime Munguia as a mandatory didn't want to fight him, and how Triple G never fought him. I didn't like any of that. Let's see. Whoa, is there? Benny Bronx said there's a rumor on Andre versus Munguia. Is that true? And if that's the case, is Andre going to come back to 160? Because you would think that that's where that fight would be made, even if Munguia's last fight, I believe, was at a catchweight, 164 or 168, something like that. But I would love to see Andre versus Munguia. No, it's not Andre versus Charlo or Andre versus, take your pick, Triple G. But Andre versus Munguia, I would have to think long and hard on who I would pick to win that fight. Yes, Munguia might still have might be a little rough around the edges and might not be the sweet scientist Demetrius Andrade is, but man, he brings absolute hell to the ring. And Munguia didn't look great in those first couple rounds in his last fight either, right? But he damn sure figured it out. Yeah, you're right. MAW Quigley, Jason Quigley, right? Yeah, thank you for that. Was Andre's last opponent that he finished within like a round or two. Let's see what we got. Yeah, I don't picture Munguia versus or Andre versus Munguia happening, but I would love for that to happen. Another thing that I wanted to cover really briefly was just a couple of quick announcements. Shakur Stevenson looks like he's going to be fighting Robson Conceição, the guy who gave Oscar Valdez all he could handle, at least in the first half of the fight, right? I think he kind of left too much on the table to where he couldn't be too mad at Oscar Valdez winning that fight. But he was looking really good in those first 4 or 5 rounds. But it looks like Shakur Stevenson is going to fight Robson Conceição. I don't hate that fight. Obviously, it's not the fight we want to see Shakur Stevenson in. And, most people want to see Shakur Stevenson start fighting the 135 guys sooner rather than later. I don't mind him sticking around and unifying at 130. The guy who just knocked out Ogawa, Joe Cordina, maybe that could happen down the line, even though that would require, again, Bob Arum putting Shakur Stevenson up against Eddie Hearns, Joe Cordina. Don't hold your breath, right? But Shakur Stevenson versus Robson Conceição, the kind of slick boxer, former Olympic gold medalist, it appears, it's not official yet, but it looks like they're on their way to making that one as Shakur Stevenson's next fight. I do definitely want to talk some Bam Rodriguez today as well. Yeah, okay, snoozer. Music and sports games does not like Shakur Stevenson versus Robson Conceição. Yeah, Munguia needs to challenge himself. Enedino Cristobal, hey, thank you for coming through. Let's see. He says Munguia needs to challenge himself. A loss does not ruin his career. He is young enough to bounce back. Yeah, absolutely. And the way that he decimated, Saddam Ali, which, in retrospect, Saddam Ali had no business in the ring with Jaime Munguia. It's funny. What fight was I researching? I think it was Ray Vargas versus Hovhannissian, because Ray Vargas is about to fight Magsayo. How am I right now? Am I still muted? Are we good? Thank you. Heck yeah. But yeah, I was saying that I was like researching the Mark Magsayo versus Ray Vargas fight, which I'm gonna have a preview up tomorrow morning. I was watching Ray Vargas versus Azat Hovhannissian, which took place on the Saddam Ali versus Jaime Munguia undercard. I kind of forgot about that. That fight was on the undercard, but Hovhannissian, or not Hovhannissian, but Jaime Munguia was obviously an oversized 154 guy, but at 160, the run has been so disappointing, and it just in terms of opponent by opponent quality. And I wonder, because the talk at the time was that Jaime Munguia actually threw his name in the hat when Gennady Golovkin was looking for his next opponent. So he was disqualified. Basically, the sanctioning body said, no, you don't, because he hadn't fought at 160. He was still a 154 guy. So Jaime Munguia, at least the way, it could have been a bluff. It could have been Golden Boy throwing his name in the hat just to get his name in the mix and then take it right out like, up, psych. It could have been that. But his name was being mentioned to fight Triple G around the time that fight was then, okay, they said no to Jaime Munguia, so he wasn't in the running for the next Triple G fight. I think it then became Kell Brook. I think that was when Kell Brook then fought Triple G. But then Jaime Munguia kind of slid in as a mandatory for the belt that Saddam Ali won at 154 against Miguel Cotto. So you basically had one non-154 guy, because Saddam Ali was like a 147 guy, beat another, let's be honest, non-154 guy, Miguel Cotto. Had a lot of success at 154, but that's just because he was so damn good, Miguel Cotto, but he was never a 154 guy, right? So yeah, 154 guy beat another non-154 guy, and then lose to a giant 154 guy in Jaime Munguia. But yeah, I have not been pleased with Jaime Munguia's run at 160. Yeah, that was a robbery against Dennis Hogan. I thought that Dennis Hogan deserved a close decision win against Jaime Munguia. That one's going to be one of those like controversial ones, like, Floyd versus Castillo, one of those types of things that people are going to say, oh, but this one, right? Yeah, Munguia. Let's see, like Music and Sports Game says Munguia is like Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis. Okay, so by the way, in a couple weeks, Ryan Garcia is going to fight Javier Fortuna. I tend to think that fight's a lot more competitive than some. Some people think that it's weird. It's like these guys have like this, it's like the shiny new object theory or something, right? There's always like the next guy who's like, it's like the car that's like straight off the lot. The new Ferrari that's just like fresh off the lot. It's spotless. We always get this new influx. Right now, who are the shiny new objects? Boots Ennis, Ryan Garcia, even though he was dropped, right? Virgil Ortiz Jr., Janabek. There's always like the next crop of guys who are looking untouchable. Xander Zayas, right? From the Puerto Rican. We always have these types of fighters, and it's almost like when they're fighting against guys who are proven, like Javier Fortuna, that the public just goes with the shiny new object, and they think that it's a foregone conclusion that this new guy, Ryan Garcia, is just going to mop the floor with Javier Fortuna. But I'm like, not so fast. So I'm going to do a preview probably sometime early next week or at the end of this week on Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. But, Ryan Garcia is still very, very, very young, right? And he did, to his credit, fight Luke Campbell. So I'm not mad at how they're building his career. I don't think that most early 20s fighters who are like 22, 23, 24 should be jumping right into the fire with like an elite or near elite 31-year-old, 30-year-old. You do have to matchmake somewhat wisely. I don't know if Ryan Garcia might be biting off more than he could chew against somebody who, fought a super close fight with Robert Easter Jr. And like, if I were to ask you, who do you think wins between prime Robert Easter Jr. or Ryan Garcia right now? Like today's Ryan Garcia versus, let's say, Robert Easter Jr. from 3-4 years ago. Who would you pick? I don't know the answer to that, but Javier Fortuna fought super evenly with him. Yes, I think that Javier Fortuna has also, faded just a little bit. I mean, not just because he lost to Jojo Diaz, But there were a couple fights before that where it was like, okay, is it still, total? Just as I'm about to say that, I'm then also remembering that Fortuna also knocks most of his opponents out still to this day. Like, if you're not an elite fighter, you're probably going to get knocked out by Javier Fortuna. So I'm thinking, like, don't sleep on Fortuna in this one, even if Ryan Garcia is looking like one of those shiny new objects. Let's see. Yeah, Jay Foreman. Okay, music and sports. Golden Boy doesn't offer a Triple G a huge bag for. Yeah, I agree. Golden Boy, it's crazy because Oscar De La Hoya during his fight career was fighting, the baddest guys out there, one after another after another. I remember just watching fight after fight thinking, is he going to lose now? Is he going to lose now? Is he going to lose now? And yes, many people thought that he lost to like Ike Corte before he was kind of robbed against Felix Trinidad. That was, Oscar's first loss, and then lost more clearly against Shane Mosley. But I was saying all that to say, Oscar De La Hoya fought all of the baddest, but it's like he doesn't take the same approach as a promoter that he personally did as a fighter. And not that he should. You don't want to just, feed your 23-year-old, because not every 23-year-old is the Golden Boy winning, the Olympic gold medal and then coming right in and fighting like Yuri Boy Campos and John Molina and Obakar and all these very good fighters, Gennaro Chicanito Hernandez and Rafael Ruelas. Like, this is like when Oscar was still in his early to mid-20s. Golden Boy wasted no time getting after it. But he's not taking the same approach with most of his prospects, with most of his top fighters. If anything, I'm a little bit surprised at how quickly he's kind of fast-tracking Ryan Garcia a little bit. Just a little bit. There are exceptions, but most people aren't the exception. So I'm not mad at how they are building Ryan Garcia at this point. Protecting investments, MAW. Yeah, you're right. Oscar is protecting his investments, and Floyd does, to a degree, do the same thing. By the way, do you guys think Gervonta Davis ends up staying with Mayweather? Does he stay with Premier Boxing, Al Heyman? Does he leave and go with another promoter, or does he self-promote like Mikey Garcia or Roy Jones and just do one-offs, which usually doesn't end up working well for the fighter? We've seen it work for like Floyd Mayweather, but he still had bigger alliances, right? You still need your higher connections to be able to pull that off effectively. It didn't work as well for Mikey Garcia, even though he did get paid a lot for a couple of his fights. Let me see. Oh, LTAMTC said, I used to be a De La Hoya fanboy. Yeah, you were a big De La Hoya fan. I was a De La Hoya fan too. But for me, this is how I always kind of approach it. I usually like to see good young fighters at some point get tested. I don't like it when they're just kind of fee-fi-fo-fumming through all the competition. Sometimes it's pretty exciting, but I like to see them kind of get tested and see how they handle different styles on the way up. To me, that's one of the funnest parts of a fighter's career. For instance, I love this part of Virgil Ortiz's career where he's fighting like, Maurice Hooker. And then, first he was fighting like the Samuel Vargases and, what was that guy's name? Just before Samuel Vargas. But, then he fought against Mean Machine Kavyaskis. I love that part of the career. By the way, weren't they talking about Virgil Ortiz Jr. supposedly fighting David Avanesian? What happened to that? How did the slick fighter that he's about to fight get back in the mix after Virgil Ortiz pulled out of their first fight? McKinson. How did the supposed Virgil Ortiz Jr. versus David Avanesian, which in my opinion is a much tougher fight, how did that one fall apart? I was looking forward to that one. Like, yes, I would have rather see like Conor Benn fight David Avanesian. I'd rather see Virgil Ortiz fight somebody maybe even a little bit better than David Avanesian. But how did we go back to I keep forgetting the guy's name. Virgil Ortiz fighting the guy that he was about to fight before that fight got nixed because of Virgil Ortiz's health issues. I really wasn't happy to see that fight get remade. But, Virgil Ortiz is on the way up. I just really have questions as to how they are going to matchmake for Virgil Ortiz going forward, being that he's on Golden Boy and they don't have a lot of great 147 guys at Golden Boy, or even with Matchroom DAZN. Like, it would have to, like, the Super Bowl between Eddie Hearn at 147 and Golden Boy at 147 would have to be Virgil Ortiz versus Conor Benn. And I don't see that happening. So they're going to have to get creative for somebody as talented as Virgil Ortiz Jr. Let's see. I see somebody talking about people making guys made men, right? Okay, not only was Oscar big, but he made he made boxing what it is. So Oscar, people got the Oscar bump when they fought Oscar, right? They kind of got that Oscar rub. And people got that off of Floyd too. And people are getting it today off of Canelo to a degree. But yeah, Oscar for several years was just that gold standard Golden Boy. And even when somebody would beat Oscar, like Shane Mosley, who for a moment was a top 1 or top 2 pound for pound fighter, one of my favorite fighters ever, Shane Mosley, even after beating Oscar, still wasn't as popular as Oscar. And plus, Shane Mosley, after beating Oscar and taking his belts and his, a lot of the prestige and being, #1 pound for pound, he ends up defending the title 3 times. Once against, I think it was like Julio Diaz, then against, I think, Shannon Taylor, and then against Adrian Stone. And then he fought his, amateur rival, Vernon Forrest, lost his belts, rematched Vernon Forrest, lost to him again. Man, I was so mad. Back-to-back losses against Vernon Forrest, rest in peace. Yeah, Mosley's career, I mean, he had a lot of big wins after that, but he never reattained that top of the mountain, pound for pound status after that. Yeah, there's certain fighters that get so big that they end up making other fighters, making other fighters made men. So MAW thinks that Virgil Ortiz versus McKinson should be a decent style matchup. I agree with you. McKinson is tough to hit. He is tough to hit, and he's but I feel like Brad Solomon. Remember when he was kind of a prospect, and he's one of the guys who Virgil Ortiz eventually obliterated. I look at McKinson as being somewhat similar to Brad Solomon. So I think it's going to take a couple rounds for Virgil Ortiz to figure it out, but I do think he's going to figure it out. And will McKinson become the first guy to go the distance with Virgil Ortiz Jr.? Maybe, but Virgil Ortiz, I mean, if he truly is 100%, I don't see this one going the distance. If he is, again, 100%. We're probably going to do this another maybe few minutes and then wrap it up. Man, this hour blows by. It's so quickly. It's crazy. Yeah, thanks again for everybody coming through. Okay, real quick, what did you guys think? Any opinions on Maris Briedis being upset by Jay Opetaia at cruiserweight? Like, I didn't see that one coming. And yes, I knew Opetaia was a very athletic fighter, but boy, like, I was up bright and early because that was a super early morning fight. It took place down under. Shout out to MAW from down under. But Opetaia, those opening, 4 rounds, 5 rounds, was just giving Maris Briedis absolute hell. And just to backtrack a little bit, Maris Briedis is the guy who fought Alexander Usyk very competitively in that World Boxing Super Series. And his only loss for several years, for his whole career up until last weekend, was against Alexander Usyk. So Maris Briedis was a very big problem. I mean, he's gone up and he's knocked out a heavyweight before. He just beat Dorticos, one of the top 4, top 5 ring-ranked cruiserweights in the game. So Maris Briedis steps in there with a very athletic but pretty still unknown Jay Opetaia. And Opetaia, like by the 4th and 5th round, I thought he was about to stop Maris Briedis. Now, Briedis ended up battling back in the second half of the fight, making it super close on the scorecards, very close on the scorecards. But Opetaia, I believe, deservedly won that fight via close but unanimous decision in his hometown. Like, that was one of those moments. But in a lot of those, cruiserweight moments, light heavyweight moments for a while, sometimes, like, some of the most interesting fights are made in regions that are not, the UK or the US. So a lot of, Western fans are either asleep when the fight takes place, or it just slipped our mind that the fight was about to happen. But yeah, Briedis versus Opetaia is one of those that I had on my radar. I didn't do a full preview on it, but I was thinking like, is this going to be where Briedis' age catches up with him? I don't know if it was the age. It was a lot of that was just how good Opetaia fought. But yeah, we just had a major upset at cruiserweight. There's a new man at cruiserweight, and it's Jay Opetaia. So keep your eye on that guy. And go rewatch or watch Briedis versus Jay Opetaia if you haven't already. This coming weekend, by the way, we've got last weekend we had Joe Joyce beating Christian Hammer. He expectedly won. Joe Joyce always looks kind of clumsy. I was surprised that his jab didn't look as effective as it normally does. Usually Joe Joyce is controlling the fight with the jab. Wasn't so much the case in this case against Christian Hammer. He was basically just coming in there leading with power punches. I was a little bit surprised by that. Looked a little bit sloppy, and he got hit more than I thought he should. Just like he got hit more against Carlos Takam about one or two fights ago. Got hit more than he should. So, I was really bullish on Joe Joyce, especially when he stopped Daniel Dubois. I still think he's a very good fighter with a very good chin and good power, pretty good boxing ability. He's an Olympic medalist. I think he was a silver medalist. But I'm starting to think this guy just gets hit a little too much. And he looks a little clumsy, but sometimes the clumsiness is fool's gold. Like the guy could be very good, but just look a little oafy in the ring. I think that might be the case with Joe Joyce. You're right, MAW. Jay set the pace early against Briedis, and he showed that championship spirit. He finished strong too, didn't he? Because for a while, I'm like, man, he looks done. Because Briedis like clearly broke his jaw. It turns out he broke his jaw earlier. I might be on mute. Let me know. I just got a phone call, so I think I might be on mute. But let me know if you guys can still hear me. But Jay Opetaia set the pace early, broke his jaw. They say he broke it in the early rounds. Thank you, MAW. Broke his jaw in the early rounds, but then his mouth was like totally open, where you could see that he couldn't move his mouth. So he was basically like this for like the last couple rounds. It was pretty trippy, but he finished strong. And by winning at least one, maybe two of the last 4 rounds, that saved him winning that title. Because otherwise, it looked like the longtime champion, Briedis, was kind of riding the ship and getting things back on track. Because again, if you look at the first 4 rounds of that one, Briedis is in all kinds of trouble. Broke his nose, bloodied his face up badly. He's basically sitting outside of the longer fighter's jab and the better footwork. Jay Opetaia was, moving around the ring great. And I was wondering what was going to happen when his legs slowed down, when the younger guy's legs slowed down in the second half of the fight, became a much more even fight. They're probably going to run it back. I'm not sure yet, but yeah, that's a fight worth watching if you didn't check out Briedis versus Jay Opetaia for Briedis' cruiserweight belt. So let's see. So next week I definitely want to cover the Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna fight. Also, be on the lookout again. I'm going to be dropping a Mark Magsayo versus Ray Vargas fight. That's going to be for Mark Magsayo's title that he, again, won off of Gary Russell Jr. In his last fight. This is going to be Magsayo's, the Filipino, trained by Freddie Roach. It's going to be his first title defense against longtime 122-pound... just a supersized 122 turn 126. So Ray Vargas, again, 5'10.5" at 122, beat Ronnie Rios, beat Azad Hovhannissian. That was actually a very difficult fight for Ronnie Rios. Beat Oscar Negrete, but he never fought Guillermo Rigondeaux, who was basically the man at 122 for several years, right? Like, basically after the Santa Cruz Frampton era, we'll call it, at 122, you also had, Rigondeaux, beating Nonito Donaire, and Rigondeaux kind of holding it down for a few years in that division, kind of seen as being the class of the division. But the thing with Ray Vargas at 122 is he never fought the other best fighters at 122, but he defended his belt, his WBC belt, not too dissimilar from how Gary Russell Jr. had that one belt and would just keep on fighting the next mandatory, and retaining his belt for several title defenses. That's basically what the 5'10 and a half Ray Vargas did at 122. Now he's fought one fight at 126, and he's about to challenge Mark Magsayo for Magsayo's title. So yeah, check out that that fight preview tomorrow morning. I'm gonna drop that bright and early. Also, Bam Rodriguez, the new name that everybody needs to know in boxing, he's just raising absolute hell in the lower weight classes right now. Not only did he drop and beat Carlos Cuadras, a former belt holder. Carlos Cuadras has had wins against he beat Sor Rungvisai, right? Carlos Cuadras is one of those kind of top 8-ish, for a while top 5-ish. At 115. So you had Bam Rodriguez, who was just emerging at flyweight, never even picked up a title. I don't think he picked up a title. I'm going to double check that, but I don't think he actually picked up a bantamweight, a flyweight title, but on short notice, because Carlos Cuadras was supposed to fight Sor Rungvisai. Rungvisai pulled out of the fight on short notice. Bam Rodriguez stepped in and beat Carlos Cuadras. This is the division of Chocolatito and Juan Estrada. So Bam Rodriguez, trained by Robert Garcia, stepped in on late notice, beat Carlos Cuadras, and then in his very next fight Sor Rungvisai. And it was one of those, damn, Bam Rodriguez is moving around the ring really well. He's looking really good. He looked great against Carlos Cuadras. He knocked him down with the uppercut because he sidestepped when Carlos Cuadras turtled up. He sidestepped him. Carlos Cuadras basically didn't even see him. He had a free shot, hit him with the uppercut. He basically had Carlos Cuadras looking like he was working in mud for the first half of the fight. But then he slowed down a little bit in the second fight. Carlos Cuadras was able to make it much more competitive. And then Bam Rodriguez ended up winning via unanimous decision against Cuadras. So then he fought Sor Rungvisai, and some people are thinking, damn, Cuadras is one thing, but Sor Rungvisai, that's a whole other that's a whole other issue, because Sor Rungvisai is probably the hardest hitter in the division. Remember how he knocked Chocolatito out cold? Several knockouts. If you look at Sor Rungvisai's knockout percentage, I was very curious as to how Bam Rodriguez would be able to handle Sor Rungvisai. Even as Sor Rungvisai is now 35 and didn't look good in his fight a few fights ago when he lost his title against Juan Estrada. Sor Rungvisai did. So I thought, okay, Sor Rungvisai is looking kind of slow-footed, but I did not expect Bam Rodriguez to basically win every round. And some of those rounds, you could have given him a 10-8 round because of how badly he was beating Sor Rungvisai. So you've got the barely 20, what is he? He's the youngest champion in boxing. 22 years old, right? So he's fighting Sor Rungvisai, and Rungvisai is just taking so many shots and he's so unable to barely lay a glove on Bam Rodriguez, who's moving so expertly around Sor Rungvisai, just making Sor Rungvisai look like he is surrounded, right? So I'm just waiting, and I'm sure y'all were waiting, okay, when is Sor Rungvisai going to turn it on? When is he going to start pouring on some volume? When is Bam going to slow the hell down? Sheesh, right? We were waiting for it, never got it. It only got worse for Sor Rungvisai. It only got worse for him. And then Bam Rodriguez ended up finishing Srisaket Sor Rungvisai. So again, this is one division up from where Bam Rodriguez was campaigning. So now the question is Robert Garcia and Bam, are they going to go back to flyweight to then pick up a title there? So then Bam Rodriguez can boast being a 2-division champion and then go back to 115 where he is now, where he just beat Cuadras and Sor Rungvisai, to then beat or then to then fight either Chocolatito or Juan Estrada, who's probably going to be fighting Bam Rodriguez's brother, Franco, right? So is Bam Rodriguez going to go back to flyweight, or is he going to stay at 115? You've got differing opinions. I know Sergio Mora thinks that he should go back to flyweight. Chris Mannix on the zone thinks that he should stay at 115 because that's where the big fights are. It's why would you go back down to flyweight? You're not going to find any payday near what you're going to get versus Chocolatito or Juan Estrada. But there is something to be said maybe about going down to 112, picking up a title there, and then perhaps then going back up. And then you've got Julio Cesar Martinez, who can't make weight to save his life, who's, been making his two-time potential opponent, McWilliams or Arroyo, just have to suffer one fight cancellation after another. So those are two other good fighters at flyweight. And so it's going to be interesting to see what decision Bam Rodriguez makes. But he has absolutely taken the sport by storm. And again, it takes sometimes somebody bringing in the excitement of a Bam Rodriguez to start getting more eyeballs and attention pointed to those lower divisions. Because let's be real, usually anything under what? Like 135, 130 is usually like not even on a lot of casual fans and just non-hardcore boxing fans' radar. Maybe featherweight might be the threshold, right? Maybe featherweight, but certainly not 115, 112. You've got to be a big-time boxing fan to really pay attention to, not just the top 2 guys, top 5 guys, but the top 8 to 10 to 12, 15 guys in that division. So hopefully Bam Rodriguez brings much more attention to not only 115, but 112 if he goes back down to flyweight as well. Let me know what you guys think about that. Yeah, so Chocolatito, you said Music and Sports Game says Chocolatito has a fight lined up. And I know Robert Garcia wants Bam Rodriguez to go back to flyweight and to kind of just settle in, where he was. Even though a lot of guys who just, a lot of people who just watched what Bam did to Quadras and Sora Rungvisai, you can't help but just be curious how that plays out against the other, 115 fighters. But, what's so refreshing about Bam Rodriguez is that, sometimes I feel like people oversimplify certain things. Like you heard, when Golovkin was really emerging, he started using the term, Mexican style boxing, right? And it's because you do see a lot of fighters who kind of put their head down and they scrap, right? And we do get a lot of that from a lot of fighters, but you also do have a lot of Mexican fighters with more of a sweet science style. I mean, look, Oscar De La Hoya, Virgil Ortiz, Canelo Alvarez. I mean, even though Canelo Alvarez does like to get in there and bang, he is a technician if there ever was one, right? Bam Rodriguez, trained by Robert Garcia, who has trained a lot of fighters who more so adhere to the proverbial Mexican style. Brandon Rios, Antonio Margarito, several fighters over the years. Not so much Nonito Donaire, right? More technician, but Bam Rodriguez is as good a mover as you get in those, not only in those lower weight classes, but in any weight class. You see the way that he was circling. Hey, hello. Oh my God. Yeah. So, my fiance's dad, is in the house. Thank you for coming through. What is good? I've been practicing the saxophone a lot. I got some videos I want to show you, man. Thank you again. And props, I don't know if you heard, we were just talking about it. Jay Opetaia, Lua Lilio, a Samoan of Samoan descent. So we often talk boxing, right? Jay Opetaia, new cruiserweight champion. Salute, props. He just upset Maris Briedis last weekend. Big news. Yeah. Heck yeah. Thanks for coming through. And then, let's see. Yeah, Jay Foreman, Marquez, exactly. Finito Lopez, Mikey Garcia. Yeah, more Latino Mexican fighters who don't have your quintessential Mexican style. So, yeah, Bam Rodriguez, add him to the list. I mean, he does bang. Yeah, he does crack. But, I mean, you just look at his footwork. It's almost Lomachenko-like. I don't want to echo the sentiments of people who just saw what he did against first Carlos Quadras and then Sora Rungvisai, but the movement really is reminiscent of that. I actually think that it's weird because he keeps the high shoulders, which is a responsible thing to do, and he does have what I would consider like an active high guard. So he puts his hands up here, but a lot of times when you see a guy fighting with a high guard, you see them more or less stationary, but he's moving his feet with the high guard and then skillfully placing his punches. It's something to truly behold. I mean, Robert Garcia's got to be so proud. But yeah, Yeah, so we're about to wrap this one up, guys, and I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. I can't wait to do this again next Tuesday. And again, sorry I was out for the last couple weeks. Everybody's good right now. Yeah, shout out again, Lo. Thank you again for coming through. Super, super. Like, I saw your name pop up. I'm like, oh man, thank you. But yeah, we're going to do this again. Again, keep your eye out tomorrow morning for that preview on Mark Magsayo versus Ray Vargas. That's going to be a very interesting fight taking place this weekend. And I also just dropped a Derek Chisora versus Kubrat Pulev 2 preview. Give that a look. I also dropped another an early thoughts video on Canelo versus Triple G3. And in about 2 to 3 days, I'm going to drop a video on some early thoughts on Usyk versus Anthony Joshua 2. MAW, thanks for coming through. Once again, Music and Sports Games, thanks for coming through. Jay Foreman, shout out. Thanks for coming through. I know Benny Bronx was in the house. Thanks for coming through. Stan Tucker, a.k.a. Dad, thanks for coming through. LTAMTC, thank you. Who else we got in the house? Yeah, Benny Bronx, thanks again. Enedino Cristobal, thank you again for coming through. And I'm just reading the comments, just seeing the names. I don't even know if there's a button I could push to see who is actually in attendance. I'm still a little bit green with this live chat, but hey, good thing this one didn't cut out, right? We had a couple mute moments, but we didn't need to get back on a second stream. So I'm pretty happy about that. Sector Roblox, thanks for coming through once again. Ron Sizzle 402, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah, TJ, thanks as always for coming through. NMTK, thank you for coming through. Yeah, I can't wait to pick this up. Leonard Thomas, thanks for coming through. Pick it up where we left off next time we get together. Dennis F, yeah, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. So we have a good week of boxing. Enjoy the fights coming up. Yeah, let's always feel free to speculate. Let's give out some like hypothetical matchups. Also in the comments, let me know some of the divisions that you feel are the most disappointing. We talked about 160 and to a degree 168 because of the top elite fighters' unwillingness to fight each other. Let me know also in any comment, in any video, what is a division that you want to see more unification or just more of the best fighting the best at. Of course, lightweight is another one, right? But yeah, thank you guys again for coming through. EK, what's up? Thanks for coming through. Heck yeah. And again, I can't wait to talk with you guys some more. Enjoy the fights this week, and everybody stay safe out there. I mean, I know there are a lot of valleys and peaks, everything from COVID to these crazy shootings, man. Rest in peace. We just had another couple of them over the 4th of July weekend. Yeah, it's a crazy world out there. I just hope everybody keeps their head on a swivel and be safe, you know. And thank you, as always, for not only watching the previews that I've been doing, but also joining in on the live chats and lending very thoughtful commentary. I really get a lot of enjoyment off of checking out your guys' opinions, your guys' thoughts, your guys' questions, just your guys' takes. Hot takes, cold takes, all kinds of takes. Like I really get a lot of enjoyment, and it makes me even that much more of a boxing fan. So shout out to all of you guys, and thanks again for coming in. Until next time, I'm Wood. Peace. Optimistically cynical. Thank you. Oh wow. You're a fool for that one. Optimistically cynical. Appreciate you too, MAW. Heck yeah. Peace, y'all.